The grand halls of the Sci-Fi palace stretched high into the sky, carved from dark metal and glowing with strange alien symbols. In the center of the throne room, High Sovereign Veilzor sat upon his towering seat, his golden armor reflecting the dim blue light. He was the ruler of the Sci-Fi Dominion, a mighty empire known for its warriors, its conquests, and its belief in absolute strength. But today, his expression was grim. Before him stood his only daughter, Princess Kalira. Unlike most of her kind, she was small, frail-looking, and lacked the brutal power that defined the Sci-Fi. In their warrior culture, she was seen as a failure. The court was filled with nobles, generals, and advisors, silent but watching. They all knew why they had been summoned. The High Sovereign had prepared a gift for his daughter, a gift he believed would change her fate. With a wave of his massive hand, the doors to the throne room opened. Two Sci-Fi guards stepped forward, dragging the human between them. He was tall but lean, his muscles hardened by past battles. His short brown hair was messy, and his face had bruises from a recent struggle. His clothes were torn, but his green eyes burned with defiance. The nobles murmured in disgust. A human. Humans were a lesser species in their eyes, weak, fragile, and unworthy of respect. Many believed they were only good for two things: servitude or amusement. The High Sovereign spoke, his deep voice echoing through the hall. "This is my gift to you, Kalira." His golden eyes locked onto his daughter, a human warrior. "I took him from a battlefield where his people lost. He is yours to command, to train with, or to do with as you please." Kalira blinked in confusion. "A human." The High Sovereign leaned forward. "You are weak, my daughter, but perhaps in spending time with this creature, you will learn something of combat, of dominance, of strength." The human smirked, his lips curling with amusement. "So that's what this is. You think I can make her stronger?" His voice was calm, but there was no fear in it. The nobles gasped at his tone. A mere human speaking so casually to the High Sovereign. Outrageous. One of the guards slammed the human onto his knees. "Silence, slave." But the human did not bow. He gritted his teeth and lifted his head, staring directly at the princess. His gaze was not one of submission, but of challenge. Kalira felt something strange at that moment. She had always been treated as fragile, unworthy of being a warrior. But this human, a supposed weakling, was standing strong despite being beaten, captured, and humiliated. "Tell me, human," she said slowly, "what is your name?" The man's gaze remained steady. "Ethan Voss," he said. "Do you know why you are here?" Ethan chuckled. "Oh, I have a pretty good idea. Your father thinks you're weak. He thinks a pathetic human like me can teach you something." His eyes flicked toward the High Sovereign. "Maybe he's right." Gasps filled the room. How dare he? But Kalira tilted her head, studying him. "And what do you think?" Ethan smirked. "I think your people don't understand real strength." Silence. Then the High Sovereign chuckled, a deep rumbling sound. "Bold words, human, but you forget your place. You are a servant now. You will teach my daughter, and you will obey." Ethan's smile did not fade. "We'll see about that." The High Sovereign waved his hand, dismissing the court. The nobles left, some shaking their heads in disgust, others whispering in amusement. They all expected the human to break soon. Kalira remained still for a moment before finally turning toward Ethan. "Come," she said, "let's see if you are as strong as you claim." Ethan stood, rubbing his sore wrists where the guards had held him. A strange feeling filled the air between them. This was not a meeting between master and slave. This was a meeting between a warrior and a student, and neither of them knew just how much this would change the fate of an entire empire. The training chamber was a vast, open space inside the Sci-Fi palace. The walls were lined with ancient weapons, and the floor was made of dark metal, bearing the marks of many battles fought within it. Kalira stood at the center, her arms crossed as she studied Ethan Voss. the human her father had gifted her. He was still bruised from the rough treatment of the guards, but he stood tall, his green eyes sharp. There was no fear in them, no submission, only curiosity and challenge. "I don't understand," Kalira said finally. "You are human. My people say you are weak. But I saw you in the throne room. You did not bow, even when beaten." Ethan smirked. "That's because strength isn't about muscles or looking scary. It's about never giving up." Kalira frowned. That was not the Xalfar way. Her people believed strength came from power, from crushing your enemies beneath your feet. She had never heard anyone describe it the way Ethan did. She reached for a long, curved training sword and tossed it to him. "Show me," she said. Ethan caught the weapon with ease, weighing it in his hands. "You sure? I thought I was supposed to be your servant." Kalira narrowed her eyes. "I want to know what makes humans so stubborn." Ethan chuckled. "All right, princess. Let's begin." The first lesson. Kalira lunged first, swinging her sword with all her strength. Ethan sidestepped easily. She spun, trying to strike again, but he ducked under the blade and tapped her side with the flat of his sword. Not enough to hurt, but enough to tell her he had won that exchange. She growled in frustration. "You're faster than you look." "It's not about speed," Ethan said, stepping back. "It's about thinking ahead. You fight with brute force, but you don't watch your opponent." Kalira gritted her teeth. "Xalfar warriors fight with power. It is our way." Ethan shrugged. "And that's why you lose against humans." Kalira froze. "What?" Ethan spun his sword in his hand casually. "Your people are bigger, stronger, and more advanced than us, right? So why do humans keep surviving against your empire? Why do we still fight, even when outnumbered?" Kalira had no answer. The Xalfar believed humans were weak, yet human rebellions never truly died out. Her father had ordered battles against them, but even when humans lost, they always returned. "Because we don't just fight with strength," Ethan continued. "We fight with strategy, endurance, and willpower." Kalira stared at him, gripping her sword tightly. "Teach me." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" She nodded. "I am tired of being seen as weak. If you are as strong as you claim, then prove it. Make me stronger." Ethan studied her for a moment before nodding. "All right. First lesson. Stop trying to be like them." Kalira frowned. "What do you mean?" "You're trying to fight like a traditional Xalfar warrior. Big, powerful, overwhelming. But that's not your strength." He pointed at her. "You're faster than most of your people. More flexible. Use that." Kalira had never thought of it that way before. Ethan grinned. "Now, let's try again. And this time, think." The fight that changed everything. Kalira took a deep breath and watched him carefully. When she attacked, she didn't just swing wildly. She faked an attack high but struck low. Ethan barely dodged. "Better," he admitted. She pressed forward, but Ethan countered, forcing her to defend. She was sweating now, but she was learning. For the next hour, they fought. Every time she failed, Ethan pointed out her mistakes. But instead of mocking her like the Xalfar warriors did, he explained, guided, and pushed her to think differently. Kalira realized something. This human was not just a warrior. He was a teacher. And she was improving. A new kind of strength. When they finally stopped, Kalira was exhausted but smiling. Ethan smirked. "Not bad, princess. You might actually survive a real fight one day." She rolled her eyes. "You are arrogant." "I'm human," he said with a grin. Kalira shook her head, but she felt different now. Stronger, not just physically, but mentally. Then the doors to the training hall slammed open. A group of Xalfar warriors entered, led by a tall, armored fighter named Commander Vakor. He sneered when he saw Kalira standing beside Ethan. "So it is true," Vakor growled. "The princess lowers herself to train with a mere human." Kalira clenched her fists. What do you want, Vakor? The commander smirked. To remind you of your place, he gestured to Ithan. And to show you what happens when a slave forgets his. Two warriors stepped forward, weapons drawn. Ithan sighed, rolling his shoulders. Guess lesson 2 comes early. Kalira's heart pounded. This was no longer training. This was real. And for the first time in her life, she was ready to fight back. The air in the training hall grew heavy with tension. The Xalfar warriors stepped forward, their glowing red eyes fixed on Ithan. Their sharp weapons gleamed under the dim lights. Kalira clenched her fists. She knew what this was. A test, a warning, a message. Commander Vakor stood at the front, his armored form towering over them. Step away from the human, princess, he said with a smirk. This is between us. Ithan exhaled slowly, his body relaxed, but his eyes sharp. He had been in situations like this before. He knew how this would go. Kalira didn't move. Why are you here, Vakor? The commander crossed his arms. Because the High Sovereign allows you to play your little game. But we, the true warriors of the Xalfar, will not stand by and watch our people be tainted by human weakness. One of the warriors cracked his knuckles. We are here to remind him of his place. Ithan smirked. Yeah, and what place is that? On the ground, Vakor said. Bleeding. Kalira felt her anger rise. They didn't see Ithan as a person. Just a thing. A servant. A plaything to be broken. She stepped in front of Ithan. No. Vakor raised an eyebrow. No. Kalira's grip tightened around her sword. If you want to fight him, you fight me first. The warriors laughed. One of them shook his head. You think you can stand against us? Kalira straightened her back. Try me. Vakor's smirk faded. Very well. Let's see what your human teacher has given you. The fight begins. One of the warriors lunged forward, aiming a heavy punch at Kalira's stomach. She dodged. Not just a clumsy step back, but a precise, controlled movement, just like Ithan had taught her. She twisted, using her opponent's own momentum against him. With a quick strike, she slammed her elbow into his ribs. The warrior staggered. Vakor's smirk disappeared. Ithan grinned. Nice. Told you she was learning. The downed warrior growled and charged again. This time, Kalira didn't dodge. She moved in. She blocked his strike, then countered with a swift kick to his knee. The moment he stumbled, she delivered a powerful punch to his jaw, sending him crashing to the floor. The room fell silent. Kalira had won. The warrior groaned in pain but didn't get up. Vakor scowled. Beginner's luck. He nodded at the second warrior. Finish this. The second fighter was faster, more experienced, more dangerous. Kalira barely dodged his first strike. The next one grazed her arm, and she hissed in pain. Ithan saw it. Stay calm. Watch his movements. Kalira exhaled sharply, refocusing. Think, don't just react. Predict. The warrior swung again, aiming for her head. She ducked, not backward, but forward. The warrior didn't expect it. His swing went high, and Kalira spun under his arm. Before he could recover, she grabbed his wrist and twisted hard. A loud crack echoed through the hall as the warrior cried out, dropping his weapon. Kalira drove her knee into his stomach, sending him to the ground beside his fallen comrade. Ithan let out an impressed whistle. Not bad, princess. The real battle. Vakor's eyes burned with rage. This wasn't supposed to happen. The girl has claws, he muttered. But she is still nothing. He stepped forward, removing his heavy outer armor. Beneath it, his body was packed with muscle. He cracked his neck and flexed his claws. Now, I will show you real power. Ithan stepped beside Kalira. Tag me in. She glanced at him. This was her fight, but Vakor was far stronger than the others. She took a deep breath. No, but stand ready. Ethan gave her a nod. All right, just don't die yet. Kalira smirked. Not today. Vakor moved first, and he was fast. Kalira barely dodged his first attack, but the force of his movement sent a gust of wind past her. She tried to counter, but he was already behind her. Before she could react, he slammed his fist into her side. Pain exploded through her ribs, and she tumbled across the floor. Ethan clenched his fists. Kalira. She pushed herself up. Her body ached, but she wasn't done yet. Vakor smirked. Do you see now? No matter what tricks you learn, you cannot change what you are. Kalira took a deep breath. Her mind raced. Ethan had taught her to think differently. Vakor was powerful, but he was arrogant. He believed he was already victorious. She could use that. She pretended to stumble, lowering her stance as if she was struggling to stand. Vakor laughed. Pathetic. Then he lunged for the final blow, and Kalira moved. She ducked low, twisting at the last second. Vakor's own momentum carried him forward, right into her waiting fist. She struck him hard, right in the throat. The massive warrior choked, his attack stopping mid-swing. Kalira didn't hesitate. She spun behind him and delivered a precise, crushing strike to the back of his knee. Vakor collapsed to the floor. The training hall fell into complete silence. The mighty commander of the Talfar had been defeated. Kalira stood over him, breathing heavily. Then she turned and walked back to Ethan. He grinned. Told you, it's not about power. It's about thinking ahead. Kalira smirked. You were right. For the first time in her life, she had won against a true warrior. She wasn't weak anymore. And soon, the entire empire would know it. The training hall was silent. Kalira stood over the fallen commander Vakor, her breathing heavy. She had won. Not with brute force, not with the overwhelming power of the Xalfar warriors, but with strategy, patience, and skill. Ethan stood beside her, arms crossed, a small smirk on his face. Told you, he said. Strength isn't everything. Kalira looked down at Vakor, who was groaning, struggling to rise. He was humiliated. Never in his life had he been bested by someone weaker than him, let alone the frail princess he had always mocked. The other warriors stood in stunned silence. Their commander had fallen. Then one of them took a step forward. This is not right, he muttered. She is no true warrior. This is a trick. Another warrior nodded. Yes, she fought like a coward, dodging, waiting, striking only when it was safe. Kalira's eyes narrowed. Even now, they refused to accept the truth. Ethan sighed. Oh, come on. You just watched her take down your best fighter, and you're still acting like she's weak. The warriors glared at him. She does not fight like us. This is not the Xalfar way. Ethan chuckled. Maybe that's the problem. Kalira straightened. She didn't need their approval. She had won. But before she could speak, the great doors of the training hall swung open. A deep, commanding voice echoed through the chamber. Enough. The High Sovereign's judgment. The warriors immediately knelt. Kalira turned toward the entrance, her father standing tall in the doorway. The High Sovereign of the Xalfar was a massive figure, draped in regal armor, his piercing red eyes scanning the room. He had seen everything. Kalira swallowed hard. She had fought in secret, but now her father knew. The High Sovereign's gaze fell on Vakor, who still knelt on the ground, his face burning with shame. Then his eyes moved to Ethan, the only human in the room who dared to stand tall. Finally, his eyes locked onto Kalira. Rise, he commanded. Kalira obeyed, standing straight. For a long moment, her father simply stared at her. Then he spoke. You fought, and you won. Kalira nodded. Yes, father. The High Sovereign's expression was unreadable. Tell me, how did you defeat him? Kalira hesitated. This was a test. If she lied, If she claimed she had won through brute force, the way the Exalfar valued, he might let her go unpunished. But if she spoke the truth, Kalira straightened her back. She would not hide what she had learned. I won because I did not fight like a Exalfar, she said. I fought like a human. A ripple of shock passed through the room. The warriors exchanged glances, some of them looking disgusted, others curious. The High Sovereign's expression did not change. You believe the human way is superior. Kalira met his gaze. I believe the human way is different, and I believe it is powerful. The room was deathly silent. Then the High Sovereign turned his gaze to Ethan. And you, he said, you have trained my daughter. Ethan tilted his head. I guess you could say that. The High Sovereign studied him carefully. Why? Ethan shrugged. Because she asked me to. The warriors scoffed. A human teaching Exalfar. Ridiculous. Kalira clenched her fists. Ridiculous. Then explain why I won. Her voice echoed through the chamber, filled with fury and defiance. The warriors fell silent. The High Sovereign let the moment stretch, then spoke again. You have changed, Kalira. Kalira lifted her chin. I have grown stronger. The High Sovereign nodded slowly. Yes, but strength has consequences. Kalira's stomach tightened. Her father turned toward the warriors. Leave us. They hesitated, but none dared disobey. One by one, they filed out of the hall, casting dark looks toward Ethan as they passed. Soon, only Kalira, Ethan, and the High Sovereign remained. A dangerous path. The High Sovereign walked forward, stopping in front of Kalira. You have proven yourself today. But do you understand what this means? Kalira furrowed her brow. Her father cut her off. You have challenged tradition. You have shown the warriors that our way is not absolute. And now, they will fear you. Kalira blinked. Fear. The High Sovereign's expression hardened. Fear leads to resentment. Resentment leads to betrayal. Kalira's heart pounded. You believe humans have strength, her father continued. And I do not disagree. But your actions today will not be ignored. Ethan folded his arms. Let me guess. Some of your warriors aren't too happy about a princess learning from a mere human, right? The High Sovereign turned his gaze toward him. Some will see it as a disgrace. Others will see it as a threat. Kalira clenched her fists. Let them be angry. I am not afraid. The High Sovereign sighed. You should be. Kalira stiffened. Her father looked at her, his expression unreadable. There will be whispers. There will be challenges. And one day, there will be an attempt to remove you. Ethan frowned. Wait. Are you saying? Yes, the High Sovereign said. My daughter has made an enemy of the old ways. Kalira felt a chill run through her. She had fought for strength. She had proven herself. But now she had put a target on her back. The High Sovereign turned away. I do not forbid you from continuing your training. But be careful, Kalira. You have won a battle. But the war is just beginning. With that, he walked away, leaving Kalira and Ethan standing in the empty training hall. Ethan let out a low whistle. Well, that's not ominous at all. Kalira exhaled. She had gained strength, but now she had gained enemies. And soon, she would have to fight again. Kalira sat on the edge of her chamber's balcony, staring at the stars. The cold wind brushed against her skin, but her mind was too restless to care. Her father's words echoed in her head. You have won a battle, but the war is just beginning. She had thought victory would bring her respect. Instead, it had brought fear, resentment, and danger. A soft footstep behind her made her turn. Ethan stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Couldn't sleep. Kalira sighed. No. He walked over, leaning against the railing. Yeah, me neither. She glanced at him. Why? Ethan smirked. Well, let's see. You just humiliated one of the highest-ranked warriors in the Empire. Your own people think you're some kind of traitor for learning from me. And your father, who, by the way, is terrifying, pretty much confirmed that people might try to kill you." Kalira huffed. "You're worried about me?" Ethan chuckled. "Of course. You're my student. Can't let my best trainee get assassinated, now can I?" Kalira's lips twitched, almost smiling. Almost. Then, a distant sound made her freeze. A whisper of movement, a shift in the shadows. Ethan noticed it too. His body tensed. Then, a blade cut through the air. The assassin's strike. Kalira reacted instantly. She rolled backward as a dark figure lunged from the shadows, a curved dagger slicing through the space where she had just been. Ethan caught the attacker's wrist before the next strike could land. He twisted sharply, forcing the assassin to drop the weapon. More figures emerged from the darkness. 4 of them. They wore black armor, their faces hidden behind sleek helmets. The lead assassins. Ethan clicked his tongue. Well, that didn't take long. Kalira grabbed a sword from the nearby weapons rack. Looks like they didn't waste time with warnings. The assassins attacked. Kalira blocked the first strike, twisting her sword to deflect the blow. But these weren't like the warriors she had fought before. They were silent, precise, merciless. Ethan dodged an incoming attack, using the assassin's own momentum to throw him off balance. He grabbed the fallen dagger from the ground and slashed at another attacker, forcing them to retreat. Kalira spun, narrowly avoiding a blade aimed at her throat. She countered with a swift strike to the assassin's leg, but they were fast, too fast. One of them landed a hit, cutting across her arm. She hissed in pain but didn't stop. No hesitation, no fear. She blocked another attack, then retaliated with a powerful kick, sending the assassin stumbling back. Ethan took down one of them with a brutal elbow to the temple. "How many of these guys do you think there are?" Kalira breathed heavily. Too many. The fight wasn't going well. These assassins weren't here to duel. They were here to kill. And they were trained for it. One of them raised a small device, a signal beacon. Kalira's eyes widened. More were coming. No more running. Ethan gritted his teeth. "We need to get out of here." Kalira looked around. She could escape. She knew secret passages that led out of the palace. But then what? Keep running. Keep hiding. No, not this time. She planted her feet firmly on the ground. "I'm not running," she said. Ethan blinked. "Ah, princess. This is a really bad time for bravery." Kalira tightened her grip on her sword. "I am done running. If they want to take me down, they will have to fight for it." The assassins hesitated for a fraction of a second. She saw it. They had expected her to flee, to be afraid. But instead, she was ready to fight. She launched herself forward, attacking first. Her sword clashed against an assassin's blade, sparks flying. She ducked under another strike, spinning and slashing across the enemy's armor. Ethan moved beside her, dodging an attack and knocking an assassin unconscious with a precise strike to the head. One by one, they'd fought back, and won. The last remaining assassin hesitated, then threw down a smoke bomb and vanished into the night. Kalira exhaled sharply. They had survived. But this was only the beginning. A warning. Ethan knelt beside one of the unconscious assassins, searching his armor. He pulled out a small emblem. His face darkened. Kalira frowned. "What is it?" Ethan held up the insignia. "This isn't just some random hit squad." Kalira's stomach dropped. She recognized the symbol. It belonged to one of the high houses, a powerful noble family within the Sci-Fi Empire. Ethan sighed. "Looks like someone important really wants you dead." Kalira clenched her jaw. This wasn't just about tradition anymore. This was about power. Someone high in the Empire wanted her gone, and they wouldn't stop until she was dead. She turned to Ethan. "Then we make them regret it." Ethan grinned. "Now that's the spirit." Kalira looked out at the darkened sky. She had started this journey to become stronger. Now she had no choice, because war had already begun. Kalira stood in the dimly lit war chamber, her arms crossed, her wounds still fresh from the assassination attempt the night before. The palace guards had found the unconscious assassins, but they had no faces beneath their helmets. The moment the guards had tried to remove them, their bodies disintegrated into dust, a cruel technique used by the most secretive factions of the Empire. This wasn't just a warning. This was a declaration of war. Ethan sat on the edge of the table, examining the insignia they had taken from the assassin's armor. "So, what's the plan, Princess?" he asked, flipping the emblem between his fingers. Kalira inhaled deeply. "Whoever sent them is part of the high houses. If I can find out which one, I can strike first." Ethan whistled. "Bold, but won't that bring even more enemies?" Kalira's jaw tightened. "They already see me as a threat. Running will only prove them right. I have to show them I am not weak." Ethan grinned. "Now, that's the Kalira I know." The doors to the chamber suddenly swung open, and a familiar figure entered, the High Sovereign himself. A father's warning. Kalira straightened as her father approached. He was silent for a long moment, his gaze shifting between her and Ethan. Finally, he spoke. "The assassins have stirred the Empire." Kalira frowned. "Then you know who sent them." The High Sovereign's eyes darkened. "No, but I know what they fear." Ethan leaned back, watching the conversation unfold. Her father continued. "You are no longer just a princess. You are a symbol. The weak will look to you for hope. The strong will see you as a challenge. And the high houses, they will see you as a problem." Kalira lifted her chin. "Then let them come." Her father sighed, stepping closer. "You do not understand the weight of this battle. The high houses have ruled beside the throne for centuries. If they believe you threaten their power, they will not stop. This is no longer about tradition. This is about control." Ethan tapped his fingers against the table. "So what's the play here, big guy? Are you warning her or telling her to back down?" The High Sovereign's gaze hardened. "I am telling her to be ready. If you challenge the high houses, you will not just be fighting assassins in the dark. You will be fighting the entire empire." Kalira clenched her fists. "Then I will need an army." Silence filled the room. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Huh, wasn't expecting that." Kalira looked up at her father. "You always said strength is power. If I am to prove myself, I will need warriors who believe in me." Her father studied her, then nodded slowly. "Then gather them. But remember, Kalira, if you start this fight, you must be prepared to finish it." Kalira met his gaze without hesitation. She was ready. The call to arms. Later that night, Kalira and Ethan moved through the lower levels of the city, away from the grand palaces and into the districts where the common warriors lived. Ethan glanced around at the dimly lit streets. "So what's the plan here?" "Knock on doors and ask people to fight for you." Kalira smirked. "Something like that." They stopped in front of an old training hall. The walls were worn, but the sounds of clashing weapons and battle cries echoed from within. Ethan whistled. "Sounds lively." Kalira pushed open the doors. Inside, warriors trained, but not the noble warriors of the high houses. These were outcasts, exiles, and those who had been cast aside by the Empire's strict traditions. A massive Vezelfar warrior with scars across his arms turned to them. His eyes narrowed. "Princess." Kalira stepped forward. "Jorven, it has been a long time." Jorven folded his arms. The daughter of the High Sovereign walks into a den of exiles. Brave or foolish? Kalira met his gaze. "I am here because I need warriors." The hall fell silent. Jorven studied her carefully. "Why would we fight for you?" Kalira's voice was steady. "Because the Empire cast you aside. They said you were unworthy. Weak, broken. But I know the truth." She looked around at the gathered warriors. "You are warriors. You have strength. And now you have a chance to prove them wrong. A murmur spread through the room. Jorven smirked. And what are we fighting for? Kalira's eyes burned with determination. A new future, one where power is not decided by tradition, but by true strength. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Jorven laughed. It was not a mocking laugh, but one of excitement. I like you, princess, he said. All right, you have my blade. One by one, the warriors stepped forward. Kalira felt something stir inside her. For the first time, she was not alone. She had an army. Now, the real battle would begin. The first strike. As they left the training hall, Ethan nudged Kalira's arm. Well, that went well. But what's next? Kalira's eyes were locked on the towering palace in the distance. The high houses made their move, she said. Now it's my turn. Ethan grinned. Oh, I can't wait for this. Kalira clenched her fists. This was no longer just about proving herself. This was about taking back her destiny. And she would not stop until the Empire changed forever. Kalira stood at the edge of the battlefield, her army behind her, their weapons gleaming under the pale light of the twin moons. The air was thick with tension. The high houses had sent their warriors to crush her rebellion. And now, they stood on the other side of the field, an army of elites, trained from birth to fight and win. But Kalira's warriors were not noble-born. They were outcasts, exiles, and those who had been cast aside. Yet they had something the high houses did not: the will to fight for a future they believed in. Ethan walked up beside her, rolling his shoulders. Well, this is it. You nervous? Kalira took a deep breath. No. Ethan smirked. Good, because they looked nervous. He was right. Across the battlefield, the elite warriors stood in perfect formation, but their eyes were uncertain. They had never faced an unpredictable enemy before. Kalira raised her sword high. Tonight, we fight for more than survival. We fight for a new empire, one where strength is earned, not given by birth. Her army roared in agreement. Across the battlefield, the commander of the high houses raised his flag. The battle had begun. Flash of titans. The first wave of enemy warriors charge, their armor glinting as they moved in perfect unison. Kalira led the charge, meeting them head-on. Her blade clashed against an enemy's, the force of the impact sending sparks flying. She dodged a strike and countered with a powerful kick, knocking the warrior to the ground. Ethan fought beside her, his movements swift and precise. These guys are good, he said, dodging an attack and landing a punch that sent an enemy sprawling. Kalira smirked. Then we'll have to be better. The battlefield became a storm of steel and fire. Jorven, the massive Valfar warrior, smashed through enemy lines, swinging his warhammer with enough force to send warriors flying. The exiled warriors fought like demons, unpredictable, ruthless, determined. The high houses had trained for order, but Kalira's forces thrived in chaos. For every warrior they lost, they took down two of the enemy. Slowly, Kalira's side began to push forward, the enemy's trump card. But then, a deafening roar shook the battlefield. Kalira turned just in time to see a colossal war beast charging toward them, its metal-plated body covered in glowing energy runes. On its back sat the High Commander, his golden armor shining. He raised his sword. End this rebellion now. The beast unleashed a blast of energy, sending Kalira's warriors scattering. Ethan cursed. Okay, that's new. Kalira narrowed her eyes. This was their final weapon. If she didn't stop it, they would lose. She gripped her sword. Then let's finish this. The duel. Kalira charged forward, weaving through the battlefield toward the war beast. Ethan grabbed her arm. Wait, you're not seriously going alone. She smirked. Of course not. Ethan grinned. That's what I thought. Together, they leaped onto the beast's armored back, dodging energy blasts as they climbed. The High Commander turned, eyes burning with fury. "You are nothing, girl. You should have accepted your place." Kalira raised her blade. "I am making my own place." The duel began. The High Commander was fast, strong, and merciless, but Kalira had trained for this moment. She dodged, countered, and struck back, pushing him further toward the edge of the war beast's back. Ethan distracted the beast, slashing at its energy runes, weakening its power. The High Commander lunged, aiming for Kalira's heart. But she was faster. She sidestepped and brought her sword down in a final, decisive strike. The High Commander's sword shattered, and he fell from the beast, crashing onto the battlefield below. At that moment, Ethan delivered a final blow to the war beast's energy core, and it collapsed with a massive explosion. Kalira and Ethan jumped off just in time. The battlefield fell silent. The High House's army hesitated, their leader defeated, their strongest weapon destroyed. Then, one by one, they dropped their weapons. The battle was over. A new beginning. Kalira stood among her warriors, her heart pounding. She had won. The High Houses had been defeated. The Empire would change. The High Sovereign arrived, surveying the battlefield. He met Kalira's gaze, then nodded. "You have done what no one has dared," he said. "The Empire is yours to shape." Kalira exhaled. This was only the beginning. She turned to her warriors. "We build something new. No more High Houses ruling by birthright. From now on, strength will be earned." A cheer erupted from her warriors. Ethan nudged her. "So, what now, mighty warrior?" Kalira smiled. "Now, we rebuild. And this time, we do it right." And as the first light of dawn broke over the battlefield, a new era began.